All right. Thanks for being here, everyone. I really appreciate the time you've given us here today. We're going to talk a little bit about delivering complex infrastructure projects and some of the constraints that we see with our experience in the marketplace. I'm not sure if everyone here knows about Procore. Procore is a global SaaS solution serving public agencies, private sector owners, asset owners of all types and descriptions globally, with a comprehensive project management suite that includes capabilities that extend across the entire life cycle of construction. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, but for the most part, we're going to talk about some of the key challenges that we see in the market and some of the tips and tricks that we have on potentially overcoming some of those constraints and headwinds. But first and foremost, let me introduce who we have here today. My name is Saraw. I'm the Vice President of Canadian Sales for Procore. I've been with Procore for about 5.5 or 6 years. I should know exactly, 5.5, getting to 6. And during that time, I've been lucky to be essentially the country manager for our Procore business unit here in Canada. We've taken that time to expand our customer base from pretty close to 50 or 60 customers when I started in 2017 to over 1,000 today. And it's a healthy mix of, like I said, public owners, private owners, general contractors, specialty contractors, and other types of folks who supply and support the construction industry today. I'll also introduce Chris Cogger here real quick. Chris?
So great to meet everyone. I know there's a couple familiar faces in the audience, but for those of you I haven't met, great to meet you. My name is Chris. I actually work on our solutions engineering team in Canada, so I'm now managing that solutions engineering team. And my background actually comes from construction. So I used to work in heavy civil construction in northern Alberta, managing rehabilitations or new developments of bridge projects. And then I also worked for WSP as a prime consultant on a lot of projects, so working very closely with owners of all shapes and sizes, managing infrastructure projects through early design stages, the course of construction, and then close out as well. So I've been in your shoes and really here to kind of talk to you about what I experienced back in my times of the construction world, but then also sort of what we're looking to make you future ready from a management perspective as we look at different solutions. So on this screen here, to speak a little bit about my background, I have been in your shoes before. I've worked on a number of different projects. The one picture on the right here that you can see was a pump replacement project that I worked on. Essentially, this was a project that dealt with coordinating a number of different subcontractors in a really small space. We ran up against a ton of different problems with things like stacked resources, not having people in the right places at the right times. We also had overlapping work areas, so ran into problems with people not being able to work simply because they couldn't access their areas of work. Obviously, this was one of those issues that came up pretty regularly, especially in small places when we think about rehabilitation or retrofit type projects. And ultimately, these were the types of challenges we came across that would result in things like schedule delays or cost implications that ultimately put a bad taste in everyone's mouth, made those projects run not as smoothly as they were hoping to, but these were problems that we could have mitigated. Risks that we see on every project, scope, schedule, and cost, but things that we can help control a little bit better. Now, the other project, that's a pretty dark picture. Don't know if any of you have been in the TTC tunnels specifically at 2 in the morning on a Sunday. It's not very pleasant. There's a lot of rats and it's pretty dark, but we've done a lot of projects there as well, making sure that obviously that tunnel is standing up and allowing our commuters to get to work on time. One of the things that we do as projects there is making sure that the columns are actually in shape, they're intact, and they're sustaining what they need to in order to support the infrastructure that's above them. Now, this project specifically is something that's constantly running. There's always rehabilitation that can be done to these columns. But one of the things that we had challenges with was document management, losing previous designs or losing change order information. And essentially, we were constantly having to reinvent the wheel, running up against challenges of double effort on coming up with the same designs over and over again. And this was a problem that could have been easily mitigated if we had proper document control and data collection processes in place. These are a couple examples of the types of issues or challenges that come up on projects all around the world. And obviously, as projects are becoming more and more complex and increasing in sort of the challenges that we're coming up against, there's more risks that can come up. So what we're looking at are solutions to be able to mitigate those risks on these complex construction projects.
Thanks, Chris. And just with taking the theme of risk and complexity one step further, one of the things that a lot of folks in this room are challenged with today is an extremely complex set of stakeholder dynamics that we have to deal with. So some of the examples that Chris mentioned with his personal experience on the job site are reflective of the number of different stakeholders that you have to deal with, right? So it could be an engineer, it could be an architect, it could be project management teams from the specialty contractor or the general contractor, it could be vendors and suppliers or all of the above. And the one thing that is constant in addition to those really complex stakeholder dynamics is that construction itself is becoming increasingly complex on a day-to-day basis. So it's really difficult to stay ahead of that. In addition, we've all dealt with a global pandemic over the last 2 to 3 years. And one result of that global pandemic has we've created a lot of decentralized workforces and a lot of need to connect our workforces more effectively than we have in the past. So with a decentralized workforce, with people who need better connectivity, the weakest link is something that is more. There's more likely to be a weak link in the project communications and the project record, and it's something that we should be really on top of. If we think about some of the issues that owners have raised, and these may resonate with some of the folks in the room here, but one of them is around maintaining accountability and consistency. And so, again, if you're working with a general contractor or a subcontractor, whoever you're working with, whatever that partner dynamic looks like, you're ultimately also looking at multiple different systems. You're relying on different partners on a project to provide you with reporting, and your data is always, as a result, disconnected and siloed. And even if you take out all of the stakeholders on a project and you just think about the four walls of your own organization, even there you're dealing with a lot of fragmentation when it comes to systems. It's really difficult to get a real-time health analysis on the health of a particular project, where you stand, mitigating risk and getting ahead of potential schedule delay or cost overruns. And again, just really a byproduct of the limited amount of insights that you have at your fingertips at any given time. In addition to that, we're often dealing with outdated processes. And it finally leads us to the question, as a public agency, well, how do we start? How do we evaluate? What sort of systems should we be looking at? And how do we create the right environment internally within our organizations so that we can better manage these projects? The one reality here as owners is that you're not always the experts when it comes to construction, right? And in a lot of cases, it may not even be your day job. So part of this is really understanding what systems can I put at my fingertips in order for me to better manage my stakeholders across the entire project and construction lifecycle. So one thing that happens is once you start bringing those pieces together, you start creating greater accountability and ownership across those stakeholders. You start building better insights by consolidating all of your information into a single platform, and you start finding ways to streamline your workflows and processes. Ultimately, what you're doing is you're delivering projects more efficiently, you're delivering them on time, and you're delivering them on budget, right? And the one thing I think everyone can agree to in this room is that at the end of the day, we're dealing with taxpayer dollars, and we really need to make a commitment to our residents and our citizens that we're providing good stewardship over those funds, and we're not finding ourselves on the front page of the local newspaper as a result of a senior center that ran 6 months over or $5 million over or whatever the case may be, right? So it's really critical for us to stay on top of it. The one sort of unintended consequence of all this as well is that if you're really thinking about sustainability and being green, being more efficient in terms of how you deliver those projects, reducing the amount of rework and stuff that goes to landfill, and just improving overall the efficiency of those projects can be an unintended consequence and benefit for you and your citizenry. Last but not least, for me at least, and then I'll pass it back to Chris, Procore is a consolidated platform. Procore's been around for the last 21 years and has been serving construction professionals, owners, and specialty contractors across the globe with about 13 to 14,000 customers globally today. Some of you today here may actually be working on projects that in some way, shape, or form are using Procore. That is also a resource that owners can use in order to get better access to information about that project as well. And one thing that's really good about Procore is that it really brings together all those stakeholders I talked about at the outset. So if we're talking about architects, engineers, consultants, specialty contractors, general contractors, and your own staff internally, every one of them can collaborate on Procore as part of an unlimited user model that Procore provides. And then that really gives you consistent, timely communication, information, and real-time information that you can deliver to your board and stakeholders in your business that's believable and that you can rely on. The last thing I'll mention here is that sort of orange strip across the middle, which I think is our Procore partner ecosystem. And so that's also really important. Again, you're dealing with a lot of systems internally. It could be as simple as web conferencing solutions or email solutions that you use inside your business. But there's over 400 partners that we have at Procore that plug into Procore. So part of the benefit for you as an organization is really reporting on your information across a unified data platform. If you can start connecting some of those different solutions into Procore, that gives you further visibility on project health and ensures that none of that data gets stuck in those silos we mentioned at the outset. Chris, I don't know if you want to add anything to this one, and we can...
Yeah, I think so. Jazz makes a really good point there. When we think about Procore being a platform, that single source of truth for the full life cycle of your construction projects, what you can see on the slide here is that really what we're looking to do is capture the full life cycle from those early design stages through the course of construction, and then ultimately close out as well. So providing that single location for full project communication and essentially easy accessibility for all the different collaborators that you might be working with. So in the case of P3 projects specifically, when we have public industries, private ownership, different contractors, sub-trades working on these projects, making sure that there's streamlined communications with all those different parties is a critical piece to mitigating those risks at the different stages of construction. The other aspect as well, which we'll get into in a little bit more detail in a second, is when we think about platform, turn that into sort of the voice of a construction individual. Platform is a foundation, and that's really what we're looking at when we look at the Procore platform here. It's based off of this foundation of collecting data in a meaningful way and being able to use that data to gain insights into what's working well on your projects, what could potentially be done better, and then subsequently making those proactive changes to get ahead of those issues that might arise on your projects so that, again, you can effectively deliver those projects better. Now, one of the things we talk about is obviously we do have customers that are leveraging Procore today. So there's a number of different industries that Procore is applicable to. You can see a couple of different logos here. Some notable ones specifically on the right-hand side that we recently started working with are the Broadway Subway Corporation, which are working out of British Columbia, and also YYC, so the Airport Authority in Calgary. On the left-hand side, you'll see some major cities that we're working with, like New York City, Vancouver, and developed Nova Scotia as well. So covering a lot of different types of industries, sectors, and making sure that we're providing configurable usability for the customers that we're working with specifically in the industry. To give you a little bit more detail on a couple of our major projects lately, one that I always like to highlight is working with the Broadway Subway Corporation in British Columbia. This group is currently looking at extending the SkyTrain in BC by about 5.7 kilometers to essentially extend the accessibility of their community by the individuals that are living there. One of their biggest challenges when they started this project was being able to manage tons of different data in the forms of documents, project controls, financial information, and we're talking about terabytes of data in different formats, whether that's managing submittals, reviewing shop drawings, answering questions related to RFIs. Through an extensive evaluation of Procore, they ultimately determined that this was the single place where they would be able to store all that documentation, ensure that all the different collaborators on their project were held up to a standard that they were looking to achieve on those projects. But most importantly, everyone had access to the latest information at any point in time. So they were able to proactively start to mitigate things like schedule risks or cost implications that might have arisen if individuals were looking in siloed locations to solve the problems that they were dealing with. The other aspect around Broadway Subway, which is a pretty common theme with a lot of our customers, is that by leveraging a solution like Procore early on in the design stages, they started to gain key performance indicators and insights into where they might think or experience project or problems on their projects down the road. That was the sort of proactive insight where they could make those adjustments early on in the process, create standard operating procedures and best practices so that as they hand over into the course of construction and start to manage those complex aspects of tunneling, boring, all sorts of different pieces that are coming together in one place, they have that sort of procedure already set out and they can continue with a successful project. The next customer that we have here is, all good, The Calgary Airport Authority. So this is a new customer that we've started to work with, and very similar process to how we sort of contracted with the Broadway Subway Corporation. Their biggest challenge was making sure that they had a single source of truth for all the different project collaborators that they were working with. There's a number of different projects that are going on in the airport specifically. One notable one is the $100 million runway expansion project that, as you can imagine, involves a number of different entities. They needed one location to manage all the communication, documentation, reviews, and approval of their project management deliverables, but also the financial aspects related to their projects. They wanted to have clear insight into the status of their project from a health perspective, including schedule, different outstanding items, but most importantly, they wanted that financial control to make sure that when things came up, like change orders, potential challenges that would result in cost implications, they could see that early on, ultimately see how that would impact their overarching budget, and then proactively make changes or adjustments all the way back to their design to make sure that they weren't overestimating or underestimating what that final outcome might be. Those are a couple examples of sort of what we look at with our customers, making sure that we're providing them with a framework to manage their projects in an effective way, whether it's managing things like project management deliverables, financial controls, or even looking at things related to their workforce, subcontracting out different scopes of work and making sure that they have that visibility early on in the design stages. Procore is essentially acting as that single source of truth to provide individuals that platform approach to be able to effectively deliver their projects with multiple stakeholders in an orderly fashion, on time, and hopefully on budget as well. Now, I know that we're right up at time here, but if you do have any additional questions or are looking to learn more about Procore, we do have a barcode up on the screen here, which will direct you to a location that you can get that information. We do also have a booth outside, so if you're looking to ask us a couple of questions or drill into some specific use cases you might have, or you need a new pair of socks, join us outside and we'd be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you. Thank you.